Welcome to the Ceremonial News Podcast, where we aim to bring you all the latest news and interviews on ceremonial parades, live ceremonies, and tattoos from around the world. In our first podcast, we bring you a name and a voice that will be familiar to millions around the world. Alasdair Hutton, the voice of the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo. Good morning, Mr. Hutton. How are you today?
Well, I'm very well, I'm glad to say, in these rather peculiar times.
All COVID-free?
So far, I'm keeping my fingers well crossed that it stays that way.
And of course, you've had the summer off as well. So
yeah, this has been the first summer in 29 years when I've not had to trail up the hill to Edinburgh Castle. So it's been quite a nice change.
And have you missed it as much as we have?
Yes, it's always fun. It's always a nice kind of change from the normal humdrum routine to see these big crowds gathering and then to hear them responding to the acts as they come out on the esplanade. And it's when you see people, particularly when you see them going home, and I often come down out to the stand and walk down the hill amongst them. They don't know who I am, but I'm with them and I'm getting a clear sense of their enjoyment, you know, that they've had a good evening, and it's nice to feel that you've been part of that.
Yeah, well, I'm sure everybody knows who you are just by listening to your voice on this our first podcast. He's shaking his head, everybody. He's a very modest man. So I thought, if it's okay with yourself, if we just start at the beginning by setting the scene. You were born in London.
Yes.
And educated in Scotland, and then moved to Australia at the age of 14.
14, yep.
Good. I hope that's correct, because it came straight out of your book. So, you've led what sounds like an extremely interesting and varied life, which we'll touch on throughout the interview. But just as a bit of an overview, you've had a background in journalism, politics. You're a member of the European Parliament, local council. You were even a convener for 9 years. You're an author, a media producer and director. Did you have any idea when you were a schoolboy of what you wanted to do?
When I was much younger, I clearly remember telling my friends at the age of about 14 that I wanted to be a barrister, not a barista, a barrister, a lawyer. But of course, I was never clever enough to get to that stage, so that never came to pass, and it just sort of drifted in the direction of what I've finished up doing, and that's been fun.
Well, my wife's a family lawyer, and I can tell you that you made the right decision. I would much prefer her to be the commentator at the Edinburgh Tattoo.
No, well, ironically, and it's certainly not planned this way, my younger son is a solicitor. He's not a barrister. He's quite sort of shy and withdrawn as well, but he works for a big law firm in London. So in a funny kind of way, it's transferred itself transferred itself to him.
So you're living your dream through him. So, as a young boy, were you interested in military events and tattoos and ceremonial things? Was it something that you were exposed to?
The answer to that is sort of, but not really. I was always quite interested in drama, but not so much in the military. When I was at school, I used to think that the boys in the corps at school were a bit of a joke, really, and the way they carried on was humorous. And when I went to Australia, I had the choice of either going into a corps or doing drama. So I did drama. And we didn't really have any particular regard for the members of the corps. So the military side of it didn't come till much later, but I was always interested in the performance side.
Mm-hmm. So in 1964, I think you joined the Scottish Volunteer Battalion, the Parachute Regiment.
Yes.
Latterly served with Central Volunteer HQ, and as honorary colonel of the Lothian and Borders Battalion of the Army Cadet Force.
Yeah.
Do you think that involvement has held you in good stead with your career at Edinburgh and other tattoos, having an understanding of what's going on, both with the sort of drama and theatrical side and the military side? Does that give you a good grounding for that?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. It does make, I'm sure it makes a good connection to be able to speak soldier speak.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys know that I have served, and I do wear my parachute regiment tie with great pride now and again, just to remind them, you know, that I belong to the finest regiment in the British Army, in spite of what the others say, and some of them even believe. But no, it makes a heck of a difference to know where they're coming from, to know what they've, you know, what they've done, what they've been going through, and that I can understand what they're saying. So it's made a terrific. I think it's absolutely essential. Now, I was brought into the tattoo by Major Michael Parker. Now, you see, he had the twin attributes of being of having a kind of theatrical mind, a showbiz mind, but also having done military service. But he was a cavalryman, so calling it military service is perhaps a bit exaggerated. But no, I mustn't be rude about the donkey bolopus. I mean the cavalry. But yes, it does make a heck of a difference for people to know that you're from the same background.
Yeah, Major Michael Parker's a bit of a hero of mine, and he was the one that got me interested in all things military when I was a small boy, and he says in his book that he wasn't being a very serious soldier at the time. He was more interested in producing elaborate dinners in the officers' mess than doing any serious soldiering. So yeah. You mentioned Sir Major Michael Parker there. He was sort of responsible for bringing you into the tattoo.
Completely responsible.
How did that happen? How did he meet you? How did you meet him? How did the idea develop?
It was bizarre, really. I, of course, had never met him, and he had no idea who I was. But when Leslie Dow, Colonel Leslie Dow, retired as the producer and narrator of the tattoo at the end of 1991, Michael really didn't know anybody in Scotland. He did the most sensible thing, which was to ask Tom Fleming if he would do it. But Tom is a thespian. Tom wanted to wear tights and strut upon the stage. And so Tom very sensibly said no, he wasn't going to get tied down out of sight, yapping away each night. And so then Michael asked the BBC producer if he knew anybody in Scotland who could do it. He was a chap called Ian Christie, and Ian Christie had no more idea than Michael had, really, because people doing this kind of thing do not grow on trees. There are very, very few people who can do it. But he happened to see my brother, who was then the senior designer at the BBC in Scotland, one day in a place where only the gentleman can go. And they were standing side by side, and he asked my brother what I was doing, and Guthrie rightly said not a lot. So Ian suggested this to Michael, and Michael's PA, Pixie Campbell, got in touch with me, and I strolled up the hill. And I think, to be honest, to be fair, to be absolutely honest, Michael had reached the bottom of the barrel at that point, and he just said, right, okay, you'll do, and took me.
I find that very, very hard to believe. It was an inspired decision.
But I had never done anything comparable, so he had nothing to base it on.
Yeah.
So, that was it. Anyway.
He is somebody that takes risks, and obviously a risk that 29 years later
yep.
has paid off. Do you still speak to him? Do you keep in touch with him?
Oh, yes, we're in regular touch.
Yeah.
He's been a good chum, and I owe it all to Michael, really.
it's a shame he's retired. A well-earned retirement, but I think he's a loss to the tattoo world. Although obviously there are some great.
Happily he's still with us. But...
Certainly. Enjoying his birthday last week, I believe, in Brighton.
Yep.
So let's go back to 7th of August, 1992, which I believe is the first night that you appeared at the tattoo.
Heavens, I can't remember that. I could look it up and confirm.
Okay, it came straight from your book, so
anyway.
Do you remember it well? Were you nervous? Did you prepare for it, or was it just something that obviously the script was written? But you know, what was that first night like?
The answer is I had no idea what was coming because I'd never done anything like this before. So all I could do in those circumstances was to do the best I could and hope that it was good enough. So I just did it as I thought it should be done. I had a script and went through this. Of course, we'd done a week of rehearsals, or not a full week, but a few days of rehearsals beforehand. So I did know what was coming, but doing it live in front of the audience is quite different. And it was quite nice to feel the thing coming together. Really, I don't have any recollection of feeling nervous, just that I had to do a good job because this was one of the great showcases of Scotland. And I was not going to let the army, my country, Michael, all the performers down in a show that had already established a global reputation. So I think it was more a sense of determination to do it right, or as right as I thought it should be done, and it seemed to work.
And had you been to the tattoo previously?
I had seen the tattoo, not as a regular attender, I have to admit, but I had been there and seen it, and always liked it, and always watched it on television, and oddly enough thought, that's a job I would like to do, listening to the narrators, because in those days the BBC simply recorded live what was there, and that included the narration, which they don't do now. But I've watched it and heard it and thought it'd be a lovely job to have. And when somebody offered it to me, I could hardly believe my good luck.
And there was no temptation of Michael Parker taking up the microphone, because that was the tradition in the past, wasn't it? That the producer would do the commentary as well. He wasn't keen to do that.
No, Michael visualized his shows. He could see them, but he didn't really hear them. He wasn't so keen on sound, and so the sound part was just sort of an addition rather than an integral part of it. And it was important, though, that we made sure that it became an integral part of it. You know, as David Orfrey called it, the banister rail, which holds the whole thing together. You know, people needed to hold on to this rail of narration to climb their way through the show. No, Michael wasn't interested in doing sound, and so he just let me get on with it happily.
And was there any plan back in 1992 that you would be there for this long, or was it just suck it and see and see what happens?
I mean, there was a time. I mean, at that time, I took on a little job working with an outplacement company in Aberdeen, and I had to, on a couple of years, I had to make the choice: did I give up the tattoo and concentrate on this job, or did I hang on to both? And decided to hang on to the tattoo. I don't know, it was just an instinct. I couldn't have rationalized it, but it just felt the right thing to do. That was tough because I was coming down from Aberdeen after a day's work every day and then driving back at night afterwards. So it was exhausting, but I was a bit younger then and coped with it, managed it. I'm still here to prove it.
Well, we're very glad you did. So how do you prepare the script for each show? How far in advance do you Do you write it? Are you involved with the rest of the production crew throughout the year?
Yes. What I need from the producer is his running order of items. You know, which bands he's got, which acts he's got, and what they're going to do. Very often I don't get a lot of the detail, but once I've got the skeleton, then I can lay out a skeleton of the script. That is to say, you know, the pipes and drums come on first, and then we have a band from, I don't know, it could be Nigeria, it could be Germany, it could be United States, wherever. And then we have the dancers, and then we have this, and then we have that. And bit by bit, I build up a kaleidoscopic kind of jigsaw of what each act is doing. What I try to do is to find a link that I can use that links each act to the next, so that although it may not appear obvious, I can find a reason why this act should follow that act, and you know, why the two should be in the same show together, and all the rest of it. I mean, there was one year when I think it was Michael who'd said to me, we've got the Egyptians, and we've got somehow the Stone of Scone came into it, the crowning of the kings of Scotland, and he said, I bet you can't find a link for that. But of course I did, because there is a legend that the Stone of Scone, which was the traditional crowning throne for the ancient kings of Scotland, was said to have been brought to Scotland by the daughter of an Egyptian pharaoh. I'm sure it's rubbish, but that's one of the legends, and it was nice to be able to draw that in and say, even then we could find a link. But you know, you've got things like, there was a Bavarian wood chopping act in one year, and the Royal Navy doing marching up and down or running up and down. And oddly enough, the Royal Navy trains in Bavaria to get fit, running up and down the Bavarian mountains. Not a lot of people know that, so it was quite nice to be able to draw these things across. So that's part of the fun of writing the script. Once you know what's coming, then you can weave these little links.
I must say, you do make it sound very, very easy, and I can imagine it's not. Doing the research is one thing, and even that transition from the rehearsals at Redford Barracks to up on the Esplanade, it's quite a big difference. You talked about the sound of everything before. It must be very strange to hear your voice boom out over 8,500 people.
Well, you're sort of aware of it, but I mean, I'm more aware of what the hell is that? Just give me a moment and let me see what it is. Oh, no, I'm not going to answer that. I'm not really conscious of my voice. I'm conscious of trying to listen to the crowd and get a crowd's reaction, you know. So,
do you ever get what makes the difference between a good and a less than good audience, and how do you gear them up? Obviously, you've got your wonderful bit at the beginning, the round the world bit that seems to get everybody in the mood. But do you ever get a slightly quieter audience? Does the weather have any effect on the response?
Oh yes. Yeah. Oh yes. Some audiences, the nights when we have groups of American students in are always good, because they shriek, they sort of scream. They're very demonstrative sort of people. And the nights when there is a cold wind blowing, the audience is always more subdued. The rain doesn't seem to affect them quite as much as the cold wind does. So you've got to try without sounding ridiculous. You've got to try to kind of enthuse them a little bit more if you can. But there are definitely nights when the audience is not as good as it is on other nights, and you've just got to do your best.
I've been up there on some very cold, very windy, rainy nights, and I must say your voice at the beginning does welcome you into the arena quite well. Brigadier Allfrey once commented that your voice is like caramel. So, so how do you keep it in good check, and has it ever very nearly let you down?
Not really. I don't do anything in particular. It's just there. So I just use it. And I don't make any special preparations for it. So it's, it's not as though if I stopped taking Glenlivet, it would fall apart. No,
It's,
just,
it's not worth taking that risk.
no, definitely not. Definitely not. No, but David was funny about the opening. He said when he first heard it, he thought it sounded terrible, like Force's Favorites or some similar thing. And then he realized that what I was doing was just drawing the audience in, making them all feel part of the show, that they were all important. And so they are. I mean, the show wouldn't be anything without them. But it took him a while to realize that, and happily he did in the end, so he didn't stop me doing it.
No, it works wonderfully. The first year that I went with my family was '96, and we were sat in the stands, and you were doing your round the world bit, and obviously you start from further afield and you draw it into Scotland and then England, and when you asked if anybody from England was there, we all waved our hands, and the couple next door waved their hands as well. And for some reason, somebody must have given you a note, but you said that night, I believe, we've got somebody in from Liverpool. And the couple next door to us waved their hands, and we said, "Oh, we're from very near Liverpool. We're from the Wirral." And they said, "Oh, well, we're from the Wirral as well." And we said, "Well, whereabouts?" And we gave them our hometown, and they said, "Yeah, we're from there as well." So we gave them our street name, and they said, "Yeah, we're from there as well." Anyway, it turns out that through friends and brothers and aunties and uncles, we all knew each other. So it certainly does bring the audience together. It's a great way to start the show. Your voice has never let you down, but have you ever let yourself down? Have you ever made any mistakes or any faux pas or slip ups?
I'm sure I have. I can't quite remember. I can't quite remember any, but it's I must have done something, but nothing that's sticks in my mind as being irredeemable. You know.
Well, I've never heard any, and you're still here 29
Well,
years.
you try your best not to. I mean, some people will take offense at the most silly things, but that's different. That's just personal silliness, really. So I try my damnedest to not tread on anybody's toes. But some people will get their toes under your feet, whatever you do. So otherwise, no, not really. No, happily.
Does the script change throughout the run of the tattoo, or does it generally stay the same?
Sorry, say again.
Do you ever make any changes to the script during the show, or do you stick with it and that's it?
Tiny tweaks, only small things, nothing you would really notice. Yes, I adjust it very slightly every night. That's only because as I'm going along, I think, oh, I could have said that better. Oh, that would have been, oh, I wish I'd done that. So the next night I'll improve it. So it's always, I'm always changing it, but only by a word or something like that, and only to try and make it better.
And do you ever get to watch the show? You've got the best seat in the house. Do you ever get to see any of it, or are you eyes on the script and never look up?
I mean, when you've got the act on, you're watching. You are watching the show, and you have to be careful that you don't get so enthusiastic about a particular act that you forget that you've got something to do. Once or twice, I've overlooked something, but nothing significant. But so I do get to see bits of the show, and of course I'm there every night, so I can see a little bit that night, another bit the next night. And by the end of the night, you've seen the show. By the end of the run, by the end of 3 weeks, you've seen the show.
And have you any favourite years? Any acts that stick out? Any particular aspects of the show that are your favourite bits?
Oddly enough, the act that still stands out in my mind was in the very first year, we had the Mehta band from Turkey. I thought they were spectacular, and I still think that we should have had them back again in the last 30 years. They remain a highlight for me. But of course, you know, if I was to go back through the scripts, I would just think, oh, well, that was good. That was really spectacular. I really enjoyed that, or whatever. And there have been some wonderful pieces of music played, extraordinary acts that, you know, but it's difficult because on the same band playing the same music will be slightly different each night. But no, it's odd. After nearly 30 years, still the Turkish band sticks in my mind as being um, a spectacular act that I would like to see back.
So you've mentioned that you'd like to see them back, and you've worked with some fabulous producers, Michael Parker, Mel Jameson, Ewan Loudon, and most recently David Allfrey as well, who are all very good at what they do and very charismatic people. Would you ever make suggestions as to what you think might work or
Yes,
might not work?
yes, I do. I mean, I hope I'm right in saying that it was my suggestion that we get the New Zealand Army Band over, which is easily one of the most, if not the most entertaining military band in the world. Because of Edinburgh, have been invited to narrate tattoos in different parts of the world. I saw them first at a tattoo in Brisbane in Australia and got to know them. But I came back and said to Mel Jimson, I think we really must get this band. They are fantastic. As a military band, they will bring the house down, and they have. And so that was one. I also suggested the Bermuda Regiment band. That wasn't quite as successful, but it was an interesting because they brought the Gombe dancers with them. So you're bringing sort of folk little elements of things that are very particular to those places to the show. So I have suggested one or two things, not a great many, but enough to to have made it worthwhile.
So what's a day in the life of Alasdair Hutton during tattoo season then up at Edinburgh?
Get up in the morning. No, it's yeah, yeah. In recent years, I've done less, but of course, through the first, I don't know, the first 20 years or so, I was always doing other things, and the tattoo came along in the evening. So, for example, you know, I was, as you said, I was convener of Scottish Borders Council. Um, that meant having to go into the council during the day and then up to Edinburgh in the evening and that kind of thing. So every day is a bit different, but normally it would be, you know, you get up, you don't have to get up too early, but you just get up and make any changes that you think are necessary to the script. Go and do those things that you've promised to go and do, like your council work, and then in the evening go up to the Esplanade. I usually go up early. I usually try and go up between 6 and 6:30 just to make quite sure that I'm there. If there is anything that's changed or anything I think needs to be discussed or whatever, I'm there. I'm not rushing up at the last moment and quite unable to cope with it. So I like being there well ahead of time, you know, just dot the I's, cross the T's, settle in, relax, and get ready for the show.
And no doubt there's been quite a few VIPs and special guests that have visited the tattoo during your time. Are there any that stick in your mind for the right or wrong reasons?
No, no. Well, I think obviously Her Majesty the Queen, the King of Jordan, people like that. But we also have celebrities. It was very nice meeting Anthony Andrews, who's a well-known actor. Um, we had, of course, before he was disgraced, Rolf Harris came to the show, and there have been a succession of well-known, what are now known as personalities, Whether they are or not, you have to leave to the audiences. And we've had a very good attendance from members of the royal family. You know, Princess Royal is our patron. The Prince of Wales, the Duke of Rothesay, as he's known in Scotland, he's come. Princess Anne has come, and her brothers have come. So, you know, it's been an honour to be able to present the show to them.
So you mentioned some celebrities there, and this might sound like a bit of a dangerous question, but I'll ask it anyway, and we can cut it if it all goes terribly wrong. But if you ever decided that you wanted a year off or didn't want to continue, who could possibly fill your shoes? Who do you think would be the right person for the job?
Well, I have decided that it's time that I step down, and
I told you I shouldn't have asked that question now.
and I have got a replacement in mind, a chap who's very well versed in doing talking books, voiceovers, that kind of thing. He's got the right temperament in the sense that he is not he's not looking for fame and glory. He's just looking to do a good job, get the job done, go home at night, have his cocoa, and come back the next day and do another good job. What you really don't want is people who think that the Edinburgh Tattoo is their passport to fame and glory. Certainly won't get their passport to riches, but they think that this will get them, you know, propel them up the ladder to being famous people. That's the wrong attitude. And the chap that I have in mind, who came and did a little bit at the show last year, should do the job very nicely, I think.
Well, if you have said that he's going to be okay, then I'm sure he'll be fine. I don't want it to happen, but I'm sure when that day comes, he'll be grand.
You have got to know when the time has come to step down, and the people that cling on too long just don't make the right decision will die, you know, sadly. And they spoil it. That's why I want to get out before it gets too late. And that's why I've spent 3 years or so listening to voices until I finally thought, this is the voice. This is the right voice for this show. And he's very willing to do it.
We shall look forward to the grand reveal. But there we go, a first on Ceremonial News podcast. So just a few more questions. One that came in from my little girl, Ava. She's 7, and she's been an avid reader of your Tattoo Fox books, the 2 books that you brought out. Are you doing any more? Or are you going to disappoint a small 7-year-old, as well as disappointing me?
The answer to that is yes and no. I did write a 3rd Tattoo Fox book. The editor didn't really think it was quite right, but we've never gone back to it, although it's still there waiting to be adjusted. But I have wrote another book last year about 2 Dandy Dinmont dogs, which were among the pets of Sir Walter Scott at Abbotsford, and that's gone down well. I did write a sort of history of the first 25 years of the tattoo, and, you know, other shows that I've done abroad. I've done a book of Scottish nursery rhymes, and I've got various little children's books and stories and so on, sort of written, which I'm hoping may be published next year.
Fingers crossed. She will be pleased. In time for Christmas, hopefully.
The publishers all think they want to put them out next year, so not this Christmas, but next Christmas, the Christmas after.
Okay. So you've mentioned all of the books that you've written, and we mentioned earlier on a lot of the other things that you're involved in. And we've concentrated predominantly on Edinburgh, but as you said before, you're involved in lots of other tattoos and ceremonies around the world. Not least of all Edinburgh when it goes overseas. The Buxton tattoo, I've heard you there. When you leave Edinburgh, will you continue to do the smaller projects, the smaller tattoos?
Yes, I think I will. I've already stepped down from Buxton because that was taking up too much time. Some years ago, I stepped down from doing the Remembrance concert in Belfast because that was taking up a lot of time, and it began to clash with brass band concerts, which I was doing in Scotland. But I will be very happy to do smaller shows, perhaps without the same length of run of the Edinburgh tattoo, you know, ones that maybe do a couple of nights. I'm happy to do that if I'm not so far over the hill. It's just embarrassing for the producers and the audience.
Not at all. That's great news for us because we're staging a small tattoo next year, so we'll be pestering you. And the last question, really, and this is slightly off script, but for obvious reasons, we've not had the tattoo this year up at Edinburgh, and we're all very much looking forward to it coming back next year. But we've not heard for a whole summer your famous little bit from the Lay of the Last Minstrel, and I'm sure you've been asked this thousands of times, but could you do it for us now?
Try and remember it. Breathes there a man with soul so dead, who never to himself hath said, "This is my own, my native land, land of brown heath and shaggy wood, land of the mountain and the flood, land of my sires. What mortal hand could e'er untie the filial band that knits me to thy rugged strand? Scotland, Scotland the brave."
Well, there we go. Absolutely.
I think I mixed two lines up there, but it's the same.
Absolutely superb. Mr. Hutton, this is our first podcast at Ceremonial News, and we could not have wished for a better, more fascinating and wonderfully sounding guest. So on behalf of us all at Ceremonial News, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm most honoured. Thank you, Gareth, and thank you, Andy.
We'll see you up at the Esplanade next year.